Over 60 years later, we're still obsessed with John F. Kennedy's assassination, and with good reason. Here are just some of the bizarre facts that have us still wondering what really happened in Dallas that day. When historians call Lee Harvey Oswald enigmatic, they're severely underplaying just how mysterious he was. There's a lot we don't know about the 20th century's most infamous assassin. We don't know why he did it, and we don't know why he spent the weeks before the assassination hanging out in Mexico City. As Professor T. Jeremy Gunn put it to NPR, back then the city was, quote, the spy capital of the Western Hemisphere. Cuban agents, Soviet moles, and CIA operatives all rubbed shoulders there, and Oswald was among them, raises all sorts of questions.
It's a mystery wrapped in a riddle inside an enigma!
We do know Oswald used his time in Mexico to try and secure a Soviet visa. We don't know why the records of this are all screwed up. The day he visited the Soviet embassy just happens to be the day the CIA's camera wasn't working, so we have no pictures. We once had a recording of a tapped phone call from a guy claiming to be Oswald. A controversial former FBI director J. Edgar Hoover decided it wasn't Oswald's voice, so the tape vanished. That's before we get on to the random guys Oswald was with. According to Politico, CIA informer saw Oswald with two young Americans at a party in the city. We still haven't established their identities. All we know is that they spent a few days hanging out with a soon-to-be presidential assassin and then vanished forever. One of the spies in Mexico City at the time of Oswald's visit was June or Jerry Cobb, an Oklahoma girl who turned pro-Castro revolutionary before becoming disgusted with Cuba and turning CIA spy. Cobb was a valuable intelligence asset. Her claims were usually taken seriously, so when she followed up Kennedy's assassination by telling her CIA handlers Oswald had been seen at a Mexico City party where people joked about killing JFK, you better believe the feds listened. The story comes via Politico, and we should say here that its specifics remain shrouded in mystery. Cobb's file is still under lock and key for security reasons, so Politico's reporting comes only from related CIA and FBI files. Still, it's fascinating reading. Mexican playwright Elena Garro reported the party to Cobb, saying it was a meeting place for Cuban diplomats. Some were even joking about how useful it'd be if Kennedy was killed. Garro's information was so shocking that the FBI interviewed her in 1964. But Cobb's intel was disparaged by the CIA, and no follow-up action seems to have been taken. No evidence connecting the assassination to Cuba or the Soviets has ever surfaced, even after the opening of the KGB files. Still, it does make you wonder what exactly happened at that party and just what Oswald was doing there. Perhaps the strangest thing about Oswald is that he didn't spend the run-up to Kennedy's death being tailed by the CIA, FBI, and every other department. Oswald was a defector. On October 16, 1959, he arrived in Moscow and wrote to the Soviet authorities, renouncing his American citizenship. Then, when the Kremlin rejected his overtures, Oswald tried to kill himself. That was enough to grant him a temporary stay in the USSR. The KGB shipped him off to Minsk to work in a radio factory. According to Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Anthony Summers, Oswald later claimed he'd offered the Soviets information on America's U-2 spy planes.
No, sir, I'm not a communist. I have studied Marxist philosophy, yes, sir, and also other philosophers.
Flash forward to June 1962, and Oswald was back in the States, this time with a Soviet wife and newborn daughter. Given his history, you'd probably expect his return to be announced by dozens of men in dark glasses bundling him out of the airport and into a mobile interrogation chamber. Yet the CIA never questioned him. The FBI didn't place him under surveillance. For whatever reason, a defector was given free rein to waltz around the country until he shot the president. In the video of Ronald Reagan being shot, the first shot goes off, and within a split second, the president has been whisked away while John Hinckley Jr. vanishes beneath a sea of bodies. Now compare the Kennedy assassination. The first bullet hits JFK in the throat, and the Secret Service does nothing. The second bullet is the headshot that killed Kennedy. 5 seconds pass between the two shots. A high-speed Reagan-style response could have saved the president. Driver William Greer didn't take evasive action. Paul Landis, following the Kennedy car, didn't jump on board and shield the president with his body. The Secret Service guy you see jumping onto the car in the assassination footage, that's Clint Hill, part of the First Lady's detail, fulfilling his duty to protect Jackie. Interviews with Secret Service personnel by Vanity Fair talk about a macho culture where members would refuse food and sleep and spend every night getting crazy drunk. While a no-sleep hangover would explain their inaction, it doesn't explain other weird screw-ups, like why the running boards on JFK's car were retracted, meaning there was no one to protect the president if something happened. Then something happened.
John F. Kennedy died at approximately 1 o'clock Central Standard Time today here in Dallas.
Following Kennedy's assassination, officials tried to trace all possible witnesses.
It was just right by us when it all happened, just right in front of us.
Many were known only by nicknames like Umbrella Man, the Three Tramps, or Badge Man. It took until the 1990s to track most down, or in the case of Badge Man, proved they probably didn't exist, and the hunt isn't over. We still have no idea who the babushka lady was. Known for her Russian-style headscarf, the babushka lady was on Dealey Plaza filming the assassination. A piece of film would be of unimaginable historical importance. People have been searching for her for decades. In 1970, a woman named Beverly Oliver photographers surfaced, claiming to be the mystery woman. But she said she knew who really killed Martin Luther King Jr. and claimed she was recording JFK's death with a camera that hadn't been invented yet, so serious historians tend to dismiss her. That means there's someone out there with unseen footage of a major historical event who has never turned herself in. So if you're a headscarf-loving woman who was in Dealey Plaza on November 22, 1963, your local FBI office would love to hear from you. After JFK's death, things only got weirder. The body was taken to Dallas Parkland Memorial Hospital, but it barely got through the doors before a fight broke out over who got to perform the autopsy. The local coroner was Earl Rose. Since Kennedy was killed in Texas, he felt it was a state crime that Texas law applied and that he was responsible for the post-mortem. According to the LA Times, however, the Secret Service and Jackie Kennedy disagreed. Things quickly got ugly.
I'm the medical examiner. This is a homicide case. The deceased can't leave until there's been an autopsy.
When Rose tried to physically block the Secret Service from the body, a heated argument broke out. At some point, Kennedy's detail simply grabbed the body. According to some accounts, guns were drawn. Either way, the outcome was the same. Kennedy's remains were transported to Bethesda Naval Hospital in Maryland. Likely as a result of this dispute, there's no longer any ambiguity. A 1965 code makes it clear that attempting to assassinate the commander-in-chief is a federal crime. Given its importance, you might expect JFK's autopsy was done with the utmost diligence. But not only were parts of the autopsy done in a strange way, a whole lot of crazy issues surfaced later. When you're autopsying a body, there are specific procedures you should follow. Removing and weighing the organs is one, something autopsy Dr. James Joseph Humes admitted in 1996 hadn't been done. This pales in comparison to the other things Humes didn't do. He didn't preserve the original JFK autopsy report. He made a handwritten copy, then burned the original. Humes claimed he wanted to stop the blood-stained report from becoming a source of morbid fascination. On the other hand, he failed to destroy at least one other blood-stained document.
Certain people in our government tampered with critical evidence in order to make sure the American people would not know the truth about who murdered the president.
Then there are the autopsy photos. The ones in the National Archive are low quality and don't show important details like the number of bullet wounds. When Professor Gunn showed them to the woman who developed them, Sandra Spencer, as part of his work on the 1992 Assassination Records Review Board, she said they didn't look like the images she remembered processing.
She said that the photographs that she developed had a large massive exit wound in the back of the head.
Next, Gunn tried to match them to photos printed by Spencer's lab shortly before the assassination. The photo paper was completely different, suggesting they came from a different printing session. It sometimes seems the only thing that could shed more light on what happened in Dealey Plaza that day is a deathbed confession from a professional assassin. Well, buckle up, because that deathbed confession exists.
Many strange things were happening, and your Lee Harvey Oswald had nothing to do with them.
In 1966, Herminio Diaz Garcia, a hitman for the Cuban mafia, died during a raid on a prison. Before he expired, he told fellow mobster Tony Cuesta he'd been responsible for the death of the U.S. president. That's the story investigative journalist Anthony Summers tells in his book on the assassination, Not in Your Lifetime. In 2007, Summers and Robert Blakey, a former chief counsel to the House Select Committee on Assassinations, interviewed Cuban exile Ronaldo Martinez Gomez, who also spoke with the Telegraph in 2013. Gomez said he'd shared a cell with Cuesta, who told him about Diaz's confession. In fact, Diaz was in the United States on November 23, 1963, and had previously carried out 20 political assassinations. Of course, this is just one man's word, and hitmen tend to lie, but there are other bizarre Cuban connections to JFK's murder. Also in 2007, former Kennedy detail Secret Serviceman Abraham Bolden told ABC about a tip-off the service received ahead of JFK's aborted trip to Chicago on November 2, 1963. Two Cuban men with rifles were spotted in a rented room along the motorcade route, but the surveillance operation against them was bungled and the potential assassins vanished. Kennedy was a beloved president, while Sam Giancana was a violent mobster who once worked for Al Capone.
Declined to answer because I honestly believe my answer might tend to incriminate him.
Yet if you were to read books on the lives of both Kennedy and Giancana, you'd find they keep propping up in each other's stories. The coincidences add fuel to the rumors that the mafia killed Kennedy for riding hard on them. Giancana had ties to JFK's dad, Joseph P. Kennedy, from Prohibition.
The old man Kennedy was a very close friend of Giancana's. They were in business together in the old days, in the bootlegging business.
But the ties may have gone deeper. In 1997, reporter Seymour Hersh wrote in his book The Dark Side of Camelot that Joe Kennedy asked Giancana to help his son win the 1960 election. Then there's Frank Sinatra, who was friends with both JFK and Giancana. Frank's daughter Tina later claimed that her father asked Giancana to lean on the unions to help JFK win the Democratic primaries. JFK and Giancana also shared a mistress, Judith Campbell Exner, who said in 1988 that she arranged secret meetings between them.
I can, at this time, emphatically state that my relationship with Jack Kennedy was of a close personal nature.
The strangest part of all may concern not Kennedy's death, but Giancana's. The mob boss was used by the CIA to attempt a hit on Castro. Just before he could testify before the Senate's Church Committee about his work with the agency, Giancana himself was assassinated. There's almost no official record of Oswald's questioning by Dallas police or the FBI. The interrogators didn't use a tape recorder and had no stenographers present to take accurate notes. Records of the interrogation of the 20th century's most notorious assassin come solely in the form of handwritten notes made by the two interviewers. These notes are rough and incomplete, offering only the tiniest glimpse inside Oswald's psyche. And incredibly, we only have one set of these notes today, and that's because they were discovered among the personal belongings of former police captain J.W. Fritz in the 1990s and anonymously donated.
Did you kill the president?
No, I've not been charged with that. In fact, nobody has said that to me yet.
Fritz's notes are very clear on one thing. Oswald repeatedly protested his innocence, claiming that the images of him posing with the rifle used to kill Kennedy were faked. Conspiracy implications aside, this at least suggests Oswald's motive wasn't fame or notoriety. In the decades since Kennedy's death, a whole bunch of records and important documents have vanished. The Mary Farrell Foundation maintains an online database regarding the missing records. While many of the foundation's conspiracy theory claims are unsupported, the missing records are well cataloged. Among those vanished documents are a note written by Oswald and sent to the FBI, an Army intelligence file on Oswald, and Secret Service records relating to a trip JFK nearly took to Chicago in November 1963. In addition, there's some evidence the Marine Corps, of which Oswald had been a member, launched its own investigation after the assassination, but no documents from it have ever surfaced. Perhaps even weirder is the story of the missing page from Oswald's notebook, reported in the LA Times. Historian and journalist James Reston Jr. claims Secret Service agent Mike Howard checked Oswald's apartment after the assassination and found a notebook with a page headed, "I will kill." Underneath were the names of an FBI agent, a general, and Richard Nixon. Texas Governor John Connally was also listed with a dagger drawn through his name. Reston views this as more evidence that Oswald meant to kill Connally, who was riding in JFK's car and was badly injured in the assassination. Whether his interpretation is correct or not, it's a moot point. The page was torn out after Howard handed the book over and has been missing ever since. President Kennedy's brain is missing. In 1966, it was revealed to have vanished from a secure room at the National Archives. If you think that's weird, just wait. Historian James L. Swanson wrote in his book End of Days, The Assassination of John F. Kennedy, that he believed the thief was JFK's brother, Robert F. Kennedy. After Kennedy's autopsy, his brain was placed in a stainless steel container. It was kept along with several samples of brain tissue, first by the Secret Service, then at the National Archives. Being both important and utterly morbid, its time at the archives was spent under the watchful eye of JFK's former secretary. That makes its disappearance all the more mystifying. In October 1966, someone went looking for the brain and found it and all the tissue samples had vanished. The Attorney General immediately ordered an investigation. Half a century later, we're still waiting for it to turn up. So where does RFK fit in? Swanson's theory is that Kennedy's brother stole his brain to cover up the massive stew of drugs the president was taking.
Had the American public known just how sick Jack Kennedy was, he probably could not have been a presidential candidate.
According to the Telegraph, JFK was knocking back codeine, Demerol, and methadone for back pain, along with other pills for insomnia and anxiety. In July 2017, a handful of new files on JFK's death were released to the public. This was in accordance with a 1992 law that all records of the assassination had to be declassified by October 26, 2017. While most of the new files were little more than duplicates of already public material, they did contain one strange new nugget of information. From the Warren Commission onwards, the CIA publicly embraced the lone gunman theory that Oswald acted alone. But the new documents revealed that, by the mid-1970s, the CIA no longer believed this. Internally, the agency began to consider JFK's death part of a possible conspiracy, even as they continued to publicly support the theory that Oswald acted alone.
I know what it is to kill someone. You don't bounce and come this way. When you bounce and come this way, you got hit in the front.
What the CIA actually believed happened is vague and sometimes contradictory. Some agents seem to have started taking the Soviets and Cuba seriously as suspects. Others seem to have worried the killing was inadvertently related to their own work. This theory went that Oswald read about CIA assassination attempts on Castro and killed Kennedy in revenge. As Politico notes, if that proved true, it would have raised a terrible question for the CIA. Was it possible that JFK's assassination was blowback for the spy agency's plots to kill Castro?
What this indicates, and this was the judgment of the committee, is that our own people aren't as efficient as we might think they ought to be.
Whatever was really happening inside the agency, the CIA kept its concern private, even from other government agencies. Why they may have felt the need to do so is just one more oddity to add to the unexplained aspects of the JFK assassination. After the fall of the Soviet Union, the KGB files were briefly open to researchers. Among them was file number 31451, detailing Lee Harvey Oswald's time in the USSR. Before the files were closed again, Russian paper Izvestia reported on some of its contents, but rather than add clarity, the reports only further muddied the conspiracy waters.
So what really happened that day? Let's just for a moment speculate, shall we?
As a defector, Oswald was of considerable interest to the KGB, yet the files reveal the Kremlin effectively thought he was useless. They're full of tales about how Oswald was a poor shot, ranking only fair in a competition held among workers at his factory. They also detail how the KGB believed Oswald incapable of pulling off Kennedy's assassination.
I didn't believe he could have done it. It seemed to me that he was framed, using the whole situation with the Soviet Union.
While this sounds mysterious, there may be a more mundane explanation. After failing to spot and recruit a man capable of gunning down the American president, the KGB could have been engaging in a serious cover-up. The bigger mystery is what's in the rest of Oswald's file. In 1992, the files were closed once more. According to a blog published by the National Security Archives, Oswald's file consisted of, quote, 5 thick volumes plus a folder tied with shoelaces, and most of it is still unpublished. The file now resides with Belarusian intelligence, where it seems unlikely to ever see the light of day. Could it contain the key to understanding JFK's murder? At this point, anything is possible.